Welcome to the Wolfpack podcast. I'm your host, Matt Carter, and I'll get you to the guest here in a minute. So normally Justin H. Williams hosts this thing, but he's much better at the readout. I don't even have a readout in front of me, so I'm just going to tell you to please rate and review this podcast. I think that's what I'm supposed to say. We also have a deal at On3, 1 year for $1. Yeah, I would say get a dollar bill out, but you can't pay cash. But it's not much on the credit card bill. For $1, you get a whole year. That'll cover this upcoming football season, basketball season, next spring, next summer, the whole 9 yards. So can't beat that deal as well. You can get this podcast on YouTube. Please like our YouTube channel as well, because that helps us out. And a little secret, we get a little side change every time you watch and like the video. So with that said, we'll just get to what everybody wants to listen to, which is actual football talk. And my guest is from the ACC network and ESPN. Also has a very growing popular podcast with superstar Kelly Gramlich, the Gramlich and Lain podcast. And they just did one with Dave Dorn, which we're going to talk about in a second. And also the guy that makes me feel old every time I see him on TV, because I covered him at Jack Britt High School in Fayetteville, Eric Lain. Eric, how you doing, buddy?
What's up, brother? Great to see you. I love any time I'm doing a podcast with you, because that means football season is here, and we finally made it. And it's game week for a couple of teams in the ACC. So super excited to be with you today.
Yeah, so how'd that work for you guys? Do y'all do on the ACC network? Are y'all going to get into studio on Saturday and break down the early games?
Yeah. You know what we're doing? We're actually traveling to Chapel Hill, so we'll be there for week 0. So we're taking the show on the road. I'm going to pick up Coach Rick, and we're meeting everybody there, man. We can't wait. We can't wait. So we'll be hanging out there, with the Tar Heels to start off the season and really get things kicked off. So it's good for us to have week 0.
Okay, cool. Well, you had Dave Dorn. Actually, it sounded like y'all recorded a Dave Dorn interview over the summer. And then,
you know what's funny, man? We recorded all of those episodes, like with the coach thing, because their time is just – it's crazy. So I'm sending out emails like June 1st saying, hey, if we could do an interview anytime from now to August, that'd be awesome. And, Coach Dorn and then we're like, yeah, let's do it right now. I said, okay, well, it's going to be 2 months behind. But that was the purpose, just a preview. And so it was. We recorded that with him I think it was like June 10th. So it was a while ago.
Yeah. And it just popped out recently, but a great story on the fish. So I'm not going to give it away, so you listen to it.
That's right.
But he had a really awesome fishing story, which I hadn't heard, and I've known the man for 10 years now. He had never told me that story. So, but I wanted to kind of start there. It's interesting to me on the podcast. He talked about that chip on the shoulder, and he talked about Devin Leary not receiving the recognition maybe with the numbers. This was before he was ACC preseason player of the year, mind you. Talked about, I think Peyton Wilson was another guy he brought up, not getting kind of the love that maybe if he went to another school. And it's somebody who's not necessarily in the NC State family, and so you kind of have a little bit of that outsider perspective. Mm-hmm. I'm just kind of curious, what is NC State kind of perception? Does he have a point?
It's interesting is when I look at those guys and I look at the things that, I've done is I've given them that respect, because I watch, I dive into it. And Peyton has been my number 1 linebacker for 2 years now, in the ACC, and just need him to stay healthy and need him to stay going because he's just a freak of nature. And Devin, I think there was, some wants and some push for him to be on the ACC teams a year ago. And, the deal is they only come out with 2. And number 1, how do you not give it to Kenny Pickett, the first team? I mean, the season that he had. Yeah. And then Sam Hartman, goes for 50 touchdowns. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, I think that it was just so much good play. And you even look at a guy like Armstrong, who had like almost 4,500 yards. So everybody, wants their guy and their quarterback to do that. But now, Devin's taken this step and he's emerged as, really the guy. Man, I think that he's going to have just an unbelievable season. I think this Wolfpack team is going to have an unbelievable season. And, really it's funny. So many people have asked me, okay, after you went and watched them and after you dive into the tape, what's their weakness? And I don't think there is one. I think NC State is one of the most well-rounded teams, and I've said that for a couple of years now in the ACC, if not the most well-rounded. And so the biggest thing that I say with that is staying healthy, something that you have no control over. It takes luck. And Coach Doran even said it on our podcast, teams that make these championship runs, that they have a little luck on their side. They have a little injury luck, and they're able to stay healthy. And I think, man, if NC State can just do that this year, I've said it multiple times, I think playoff is not out of the question at all. I mean, I think this is a team that there's probably 10 to 12 that are probably in that bracket to start the season. I think NC State's one of them.
So, and you watched them on the ACC network. You've done a tour of about half the ACC teams. What stood out when you did get a chance, besides Kelly Graham, not Kelly, but Kelsey Riggs getting a bloody lip? And another part of the podcast, go listen to his podcast. Eric has a pretty good story about his own adventure at practice. Right. But when you watch it, can you tell? I mean, that's one curiosity of mine. When you're watching these practices, is it easy to tell, I'm like, these guys got it, or these guys, they got some work to do? And then your thoughts about NC State.
Yeah, you know what? I say yes because you can tell right away if a team has guys, if a team has dudes, and you just physically can see. And especially it's probably a little bit different. You're about to go to practice here in a second, so you see those guys. Like you get to interact with them, you see them, but that's probably the only team that you get to do that. When I get to go to 7, 8 different stops, I get to really compare and contrast and say, man, that this team looks really, really good. But I will tell you, you can be tricked because you're only there for a day. And a year ago, I went to Chapel Hill and was blown away with the size, with the athleticism, and those guys just couldn't take a step. They just couldn't, get that next level. And, it was kind of the same way this year. And so I see the athletes are there. Can Carolina do anything with them? Can they take that next step? That's going to be the biggest thing for them. But when I was looking at NC State, man, it's just so much talent, so much depth, so much experience. And, man, they practice like you want to see a team full of 4th, 5th, 6th-year guys practice, flying around the ball, taking care of each other, playing really smart, doing the things necessary to stay healthy. And the depth on defense is just nuts, man. It really is. Yeah. I think specifically the linebacker and defensive back position. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago where this team was just wiped out, and so many injuries and so many guys had to play probably before they were ready. But now, how beneficial has that been, and how much has that really helped this team? And that's such a key piece of this thing, is having playable depth, and having, when Drake comes out, who comes in, and there's not a miss of the beat, you know what I'm saying? And so that's where I think this NC State defense has gotten. Offensive line looks good. Obviously, when you're replacing a guy like Big Icky, it's going to be tough. I mean, it just is. That's the way this thing kind of goes. But I think that they certainly have the pieces to do so. I think that they love having Big Chandler back, and excited to have him and his eligibility, and of course Grant Gibson in the middle. So, it's going to be interesting to see, just what does this run game look like? Right. Because it wasn't super efficient a year ago, and you had the first offensive player drafted in the NFL. And so, what does that look like this year? I don't think you want to force the issue, but you don't want to be predictable, right? And you have a guy in Jordan Houston who is ready. I mean, it's his turn. It's kind of like Devin, sat a little bit, and now it's his show. And what can he really do with that? And then Coach was telling us about Big Demi. My goodness, he was so excited about that guy. So, just what can it look like? But at the end of the day, just remember, you have the best quarterback in the league in Devin Leary. I would not be shocked at all if we don't see NC State throw it 40, 45 times a game and just let him cook.
And that was exactly what I was going to ask. There obviously are questions about them, because you didn't mention, too, Bam and Ricky were kind of that 1-2 punch. And, Bam looking pretty good with the New York Jets up there. So that's a talented duo you lost. But I remember when I talked to Dave, he said, yeah, we want to be better in the running game, but with Devin, as you mentioned, do we want to force it? Should we just ride Devin?
Right.
And so that's the question, though. I mean, do you have to run the football when you have Devin Leary, in your opinion? Or can you just simply, like you say, ride, if it's going well, just ride ride the arm of Devin Leary.
Yeah, here's the deal: the great teams, man, that they can do. They just have answers, right? That they can
Right.
do whatever. If you want to take away the pass, okay, we can run it. If you want to take away the run, okay, we're going to pass it. And so it's always great to have that option. But if you don't, just sling it. Just do what you can, and hopefully you see a guy like Devin Carter really emerge as that go-to guy. And we saw how reliable he was a year ago. And when you lose a guy like Emeka Mezi who had so much production, it's got to be broken up somewhere. And I have to think between Devin and Thayer, those guys' numbers go up immensely. You've got a big transfer in, and Jones, who came from Maryland, that, body type wise, I think looks a bit like Emeka. Can he be used like him? So it'll be interesting to see, man, just what their approach is. Can the offensive line and running back step up enough to where they have balance? Because that's where you want to be. But at the end of the day, they're going to do what they have to win a football game.
You mentioned UNC, and that was actually one of the few questions I actually write down because I don't do scripts. I told Eric that. I just wing it, man. But I've heard this a lot. Like, NC State could be this year's UNC. Maybe a little bit overhyped, don't live up to the hype. And obviously, I'm far for me to defend UNC on an NC State podcast. But, yes, they did have a losing record, but they were close. I mean,
sure.
Could it be – if you were to say who are the four best teams in the ACC last year were Clemson, Wake, Pitt, and NC State. UNC played three of them. They beat Wake. If they recover an onside kick against NC State, they beat NC State. And I think they went to overtime against Pittsburgh, if I'm recalling correctly. So they were not as bad maybe as their losing record points out. So I put that as an aside and as my one time defending UNC on the show. But what are your thoughts about that when people say they might be this year's North Carolina, overhyped, overrated? What do you think about that?
Yeah, the one differential that is like the most glaring when I hear people say that is UNC's defense wasn't even remotely close to this defense. Like those guys aren't going to let that happen, right? Yeah. Especially that linebacking core. I mean, I think they're the best in the country right there with Alabama. If you ask me on a different week, I might say Bama. Yes, next week I'll say NC State, just kind of how the wind blows that week. But I mean, when I see Isaiah and the determination that he has, the grit that he has, the leadership abilities that he possesses, and then I see Drake, and then I see Peyton. I mean, they will not let that happen. And so for that, on that regard, I see that. And then offensively, man, UNC just lost so much. Yeah. They lost three unbelievable receivers that were well over 1,000 yards, a couple of them, and the touchdowns that they produced, and then just two generational running backs. And I know NC State lost a couple of running backs as well, but those guys, like, they were a different level and what they were asked to do and what they could do. And so when you lose all of that, man, it was almost unfair of us as the media to say, yeah, they'll be right back. They'll just replace those guys. When in essence, NC State doesn't have those problems. NC State has that core of everybody, really that's back. And so, man, I think that they I don't think they fall victim to that. I really don't.
So you're not buying into the NC State stuff?
No. And it's funny that you bring that up. It is the better I speak of NC State and the more hype and excitement I get, the more DMs I get. Hey, calm down. We don't do that. We won't do that.
That's what the culture of NC State is, man. That's
got to change it. That's right. That's right.
Let me tell you, you talked about it. I agree with you. I love the balance of NC State. To me, that's kind of what gets lost when everybody talks about NC State. Let's not forget they have a good field goal kicker in Christopher Dunn. Clemson game aside last year, very very reliable.
Great long snapper. You got a heck of a long snapper.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you really do have a lot of pieces covered. What would be, besides health, because I think that's the number one, like, can you keep Devin, particularly when you don't have a proven backup quarterback, can you keep Devin Leary upright? So besides health, what would be maybe your one or two biggest questions about it?
Just that run game. I mean, just can they get it going? Because when you do play a team like Clemson, when you play a team like Boston College, whose pass defense was like third in the country, if you get the opportunity to play a Pitt or Miami, I mean, they're going to try to take that away. Those defenses are so good. They're going to try to make you one dimensional, which in this case will be try to run the football. And so, can you do that? Can you have options? Can you be balanced and have that attack where we as a defense don't know a pass is coming each and every play, where our defensive ends can just go nuts and hunt and go full werewolf mode. So when I see that, that's going to be the thing. At least to start. Now, listen, they might get in and after that Texas Tech game and throw the ball 50 times a game and just be killing people. And I'm like, okay, who cares? Let's just do it. But certainly would love to see the balance and then just, production from that defensive line. Probably at the defensive end position, can they, really just get after it and try to pressure that quarterback? Again, you have so many great weapons that will drop into coverage and that'll make, that time clock. They're not going to have places to go. So can the defensive line really establish and try to get after? So I know this. I mean, the way this defense is structured, it's for defensive linemen to be more of bodies that take up space that these linebackers can go and feast. Yeah. But can somebody just emerge? Can Corey Durden build on what he did a year ago? Being a first-team All-ACC guy to end the season, and build on that and just put 2 years together.
Let's talk about some of the scheduling before I mean, we know that you've been, I think, on the record about your ACC picks. I think everybody, particularly with the unfortunate Sam Hartman news, that kind of puts weight. Although I did read where I think they're optimistic that he might be back this season, which fingers crossed, you hope it's the case. But with that unknown, I think a lot of people kind of pencil Clemson, NC State at the top. I've been going game by game with my predictions. I put up Clemson yesterday for our subscribers. I kind of went over my number one concern about this game for NC State. And as a guy who was at Clemson, who hopefully gets to see it this year, if you don't know, Eric is expecting on October 1st, day of the game. So it'll be worth it if you have to miss it. I promise you it'll be worth it. But I'd say both teams are undefeated. And I think Clemson's toughest game is probably Wake Forest the week before, which, again, we don't know with Sam Hartman in that situation. But Clemson's also had a pretty good run against Wake Forest, beat them pretty handedly last year in Death Valley. Let's say both teams are undefeated, which at that point probably means NC State is top 10, which at that point probably means this game is prime time. Maybe ABC prime time. You might be having game day coming there. Mm-hmm. Huge hype. What do you think this NC State team, having been around them, you spent a day there, obviously they're an old group, but they probably have never experienced something like a college game day night in Death Valley, watching the Clemson players run down the hill at 7:30 or whatever time it is. I mean, what is that atmosphere like, and do you think this team would be mature enough to handle something like that?
It's going to be nuts, and I foresee this happening. Exactly what you're saying. I've talked about this many times, that I think that game has a great opportunity. I think it's the ACC game of the year, but I think it has a great opportunity to be game day, to be prime time, to have all the marbles, both sides. Okay, let's go in, because whoever wins this game, you're looking at a really good shot to postseason play, and you're looking at championships, not farther than just the ACC championship. And I know nobody wants to get out too far off their skis here, but there's going to be so much hype around that game. The fact that NC State beat Clemson a year ago, I mean, the atmosphere is going to be nuts. I agree with you. NC State will have never seen anything like that in these guys' career. If this happens, and if this is a night game, and the loudness that's going to be out there. But at the end of the day, you're a mature team. You're an old team. You have to go in there with no fear and shut them up. I mean, just get the crowd out of it. And that is like nothing else. I remember my season, man, 2013, we're I think top 5. Florida State was top 10. Mind you, this is one of the best teams of all time in Florida State. Right. They come in there and just punch us in the face. And it was over from Jump Street. I mean, it was we ran like 5 spacing, throw it to the tight end, fumble, next play, touchdown, Florida State. I mean, it was just like, whoa, what just happened? And so for that game, you have to understand that there's a storm coming, and you have to be able to weather it. And can you deliver? Can Devin delivers? There we go. Can you, just take that? But it's going to be a fight. And this Clemson defense is one of the best in the country. I think this NC State defense is one of the best in the country. So at the end of the day, who makes a mistake? Who shows sign of weakness, and who can exploit that? I can't wait for that game. It's going to be so much fun. I think, as I said, it's going to be the game in the ACC, and every eyeball is going to be on that one.
So let's say Clemson and NC State 1-2. How big is the gap? I mean, let's say Wake has Sam Hartman. Let's say best case scenario, Sam is back.
Yep.
And ready to play all the important games. I don't have Wake's schedule in front of me, so I don't know who they're playing week 1 or 2 or something like that. But so let's say he's back. Best case scenario. And then obviously got Boston College. They got their NFL quarterbacks back. Got Louisville, who probably had the best quarterback nobody's talking about, back. Syracuse has one of the best running backs in the country. Is there really that big of a gap, though, between Clemson and NC State and the rest of the division?
I think last year showed that there is not. I think that, until Clemson, shows at the quarterback position that they have improved and gotten back to their old ways, I think that answer is no. But that's a good thing. We want there to be competition in this league. We want there to be parity, or at least opportunity for parity. You look at the SEC and you say all the time, well, this and that, and it's still Alabama, but sure, but there is a random team in an LSU that comes out of nowhere and can do it. And Auburn every now and again does it. And Georgia looks like they have some staying power. So, the biggest knock on the ACC that I've had since working here is that there has not been a consistent number 2. It's been a rotating door. It's been who wants to step up. One year it was Florida State, then it was Louisville, and then it was North Carolina, and then it was Pittsburgh, and this revolving deal of who wants to step up. And now it looks like it could be NC State. It has to be a mainstay. It has to be in Wake Forest. I don't want to leave them out either. It has to be a consistent person that is not only, potentially playing in an ACC championship, but even if you're not, you're playing in New Year's Six bowls. Like, you're going out of conference and you're handling business. You're not losing to a horrible Mississippi State team. You're not losing to Jacksonville State. You're not you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to be able to fly that flag when you go out of conference. And so that'll be the biggest thing. And that's how that gap can continue to close, but at the same time, the entire league rising up. And so I'm excited to see it. I think certainly the answer is no. The gap is not that wide, but I mean, we could be looking up December 3rd and be like, yeah, it's Clemson's league all over again. Or we could say, yeah, NC State did what we thought they could do.
And we got a couple opportunities early in the season with those Florida schools. FSU playing LSU, Miami playing Texas A&M. That really, particularly in today's environment with college alignment and conferences, that could really be a huge statement if those 2 Florida schools could step up. Let me ask you kind of a random question. Let's say scheduling. How important is that? Because I kind of felt like last year, I think NC State got a little bit fortunate. Played Boston College without Phil Djokovic, played Florida State without Jordan Travis. I thought Wake Forest had an awesome setup with their schedule last year, and the one ACC game they lost didn't even count with UNC because it was a non-conference game. So how much do you look at schedule when you kind of evaluate, okay, this is how I'm going to pick the team this year? That's something you really look at, or you just kind of more focus on Jim and Joe's on the field?
Yeah, I certainly think it's a variable, and it's something that matters. A team like Georgia Tech, man, it's hardest schedule in the country, and no question the ACC, and you just look at that and you say, man, what could it be if they didn't play Clemson and Georgia every year? Like, what could this team look like? Could they go bowling? And so that's certainly a factor and something that you look at, and just how it lays out with home and away. Like, the fact that NC State is ending their season at Louisville, at Carolina, I mean, that's a tough finish, and they're going to have to go out and earn it, to kind of finish the season and cap that off here with two teams that at that point, I would feel like are either really high or really low. It's something where you just, really don't know. So it's certainly a factor that is a small part of the equation when you're looking at it. But I don't think anybody would tell you that there's number one thing you look at is who's playing the game, and players make plays, and who do they have available? Who can they go out there and get that thing done?
Who had in the ACC? Who do you think had the widest range? You just mentioned two schools, and it just popped in my head. The widest range of possibility this year, because I think Louisville is a great answer. With Malik Cunningham, they could go on a huge roll, or if they don't answer some questions on defense, struggle a bit again. And then in UNC, we don't know what the quarterback is going to be like, but they got a lot back elsewhere. Who do you think has some of the widest range of possibility, maybe hardest to pin down?
Yeah. For me, Louisville is the team of mystery. I just don't know. I don't know what to expect. I mean, they have an unbelievable guard. They have a quarterback that can potentially be in New York at the end of the season with the stats and the things that he can do. They've got a big running back that, man, is just electrifying, and a defense that should be better, and just the lack of consistency that they've had the last couple of years. So they're my team that I just don't know. I really don't. And I would have loved to have gone and seen them in person and be able to, really, just expound on that knowledge and to see it with my own eyes. But until they kick off, and they start with Syracuse, so that'll be a nice little indicator from Jump Street, because I think Syracuse defense is going to be really good. I have no clue what to expect from those guys. And then the other team that I did get to see, and that this maybe persuaded me a little bit more to think their ceiling could be a little higher, is Florida State. I think they're a team that could win 8 games or 4 games. It's so weird that you just don't know, what you're going to get. And that's why we play the game, right? That's why we love this thing, and you've got to go see it. And who knows what could happen? You never could be quite sure. But, man, it's going to be something that – those are my two teams that I have no clue where to slot them. So I just put them right in the middle.
Safest thing to do, right?
Exactly.
All right. I got a couple questions left for you. You grew up in the state of North Carolina, so you got a little familiarity with East Carolina, and you know how important that game's going to be for them when NC State comes to town. Any concerns about that opener being ECU was going to play a bowl game. It got canceled, I believe, Boston College, if I'm remembering right. So, any minor concerns about NC? They've only won once in school history in Greenville. Any minor concern that it all goes crashing down week 1 at East Carolina?
Yeah, I think this kind of is similar to the "Are we the UNC of this year?" question. And so for me, no. But I know the history. I know how important it is. I know there's like legislation that you guys have to play every other year or every 3 years, whatever it is. So this game matters, and it's going to be packed out, and Greenville's going to be hopping. ECU fans are going to be going nuts. So it's going to be a great little test. For them, but I think that this team's too mature, too good, too experienced to just allow something like that to even matter. Like, who cares? It's about us. I mean, I could. Well, that's great. We've only won here once. Well, we've never played here. This team's never played here, and we're gonna, add to that, total. So I've got to think that they're not even thinking about them. They're thinking about themselves. They're worried about what we need to do. And it's just unfortunate for ECU that they're the next up or the first up, on this train.
Yeah. And then I guess my last question, kind of open-ended, but when you were out there at practice, you're done with the day, you go to Medios or whatever afterwards, have a lasagna and maybe a water or whatever your preferred drink is. What would you take away at the day? Like when you're thinking about NC State, you watched the practice, you had the chance to hang around. What would your overall takeaway when you kind of reflect back on it?
Yeah, just man, this team is right there. They're ready to take this next step. And when I asked them, just about the season and how excited they are to get back out there, and that bitter taste in their mouth from a year ago, not being able to finish, the way they wanted in a bowl game and against a big brand opponent,
Yeah.
and really just remind people who they are. So they are so close, and just staying healthy and being able to take that next step, and potentially getting to a championship game. What does that mean for this team's legacy, and what does it mean for Coach Doran's legacy? The massive extension that he just signed, and a guy who's been there for 10 years. I mean, it's crazy to think that. So I think that the biggest thing when I think of this team is that it's time. It's time to do something, and that doesn't necessarily mean an ACC championship, a division championship, but it means a New Year's Six game. It means a big bowl game. We're not playing, somewhere where the game's before Christmas. You know what I'm saying? Like, this thing needs to be on New Year's Eve or later. And so I think that that's the goal of this team, to be as competitive as they can and just exert their will. And a great opportunity in week 3 against Texas Tech. They come to Raleighwood there. And, you get to fly that flag for the first time out of conference against a big dog opponent that's going to have a great offense. And I think that'll be a really nice litmus test for how good this defense can be, and to remind people that, there's some dogs hanging out with the Wolfpack.
I'm just hoping that game against Texas Tech happens. I already wrote about this, but the last group of Power 5, quote-unquote, opponents that were supposed to come to NC State, Mississippi State was supposed to come in 2020. COVID, obviously, eliminated that. 2018, it was supposed to be Will Greer versus Ryan Finley, West Virginia. Anyway, I believe it's Hurricane Florence.
Yep.
Kind of screwed that one up. 2016, Notre Dame did come right in the middle of Hurricane Michael or Matthew, one of those.
Yep.
And it was 500 fans who didn't know better. I walked out of Carter Finley Stadium. A tree had fallen down by the Murphy Center during the game.
Wow.
I think there was 13 yards of total offense. For some reason, Brian Kelly tried to throw the ball 30 times in that game. And that was 2016. I can't remember the last time a Power 5 game has actually gone off in Carter Finley Stadium. So
here we go.
Hopefully that game happens. So, Eric, I appreciate it so much, man. It's always good talking to you. And be sure to check them out. Check out the podcast. Go listen to Dave Dorn's. They just dropped the Dabo Swinney one. So it's the one before that one, right?
That's right.
So you can listen to Dabo, too. I'm sure that one's entertaining as well. But I appreciate it, Eric. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you, brother. Good luck this season. Thank you.